my English teacher friends. So if you're anything like me, you've had it up to here with all the ChatGPT created work, the AI created work. I'm tired of getting disingenuous, unauthentic work, especially in terms of written assignments. So what I'm going to do starting the beginning of next year is for the first quarter, no Chromebooks, everything paper, pen, pencil, handwritten until I get to know their voice and their style and their little tics and mannerisms as writers. And based on that, I might open the Chromebooks back up second quarter. So for this one, I have something called the Great Pen Debate. We have a student by the name of Alex who's deliberating very carefully, tussling over 6 possible pens. And we're going to do a synthesis essay here where students need to give Alex advice on which pen to choose from of the 6 sources, so that he can have a stellar first quarter writing career, getting into those blue books and just handwriting everything. So stay tuned, sit tight. I got the whole exercise for you. So I have models and exemplars on how to do the introductory paragraph, the body paragraphs. We'll use my heuristics of the declarative and the inverted thesis. We'll tackle body paragraphs syllogistically. I even have an annotation exercise that I'll show you. So this is going to be my opening synthesis essay for next year. So stay tuned, sit tight, strap up, and I'll walk you through it. All right, let's get all those formalities out of the way. Please subscribe to the channel. Tell your good buddies and good teacher, colleague, friends, and students about this and help me navigate that pesky algorithm. So just so that you know, all the slides that are going to be featured in this presentation are linked down below in the video description. It's a Google Doc. You have access to them for free. They're there for the taking. So here's the prompt that we're going to tussle with for this particular piece. It says, in a return to handwritten tradition, a teacher at Ridgemount High School has banned typed essays after concerns that artificial intelligence has made student writing suspiciously coherent. From now on, all essays must be written by hand. No keyboards, no shortcuts, just ink, paper, and whatever pen survives the semester. This policy has created an unexpected academic subplot. Students are now convinced that success depends not only on what they write, but what they write with. For Alex Baxter, this has escalated into a full-scale investigation into the perfect pen. After weeks of testing, debate, and unnecessary emotional attachment to stationery, Alex has narrowed the options to 6 widely praised and occasionally insulted pens. Each has been evaluated by writers, thinkers, and professionals who treat pens with the seriousness usually reserved for philosophical debates. Carefully read the following 6 sources. So this is a synthesis essay. Then write a letter to Alex Baxter in which you evaluate the best pen for sustained handwritten essay writing. Use evidence from at least 3 sources to support your argument. You may acknowledge counter-arguments and respond to them thoughtfully. So I know that some of you might use this outside of an AP language context. So I kind of cloak the language that way, but it's anchored enough in the AP language, College Board language, if you want to use this as an introductory synthesis essay for AP Lang. I will be doing that. So as always, I've Bob Ross my instruction. And what I mean by that is that I got to the proverbial easel and canvas, and I'm writing the essay with and for the students. So you'll see like 4 introductory paragraphs, 2 that declare, 2 that invert. We'll tackle the body paragraphs together, and I'll even show you how to tag a conclusion on it at the end. So as a preliminary exercise, I want to go over annotation in the beginning of the year. So here's what I got us doing here. It says, before writing, you'll annotate all 6 sources using the color-coded system below. The goal is to practice noticing different kinds of evidence so that you can later select the best ones for your essay. So I'm going to print the source packet out And then I have a big pile of crayons in my room, and the kids are just going to grab colors that correspond to the exercise. So you can see in blue, they're going to highlight main claims, the central positions, highlight any sentence in which the author clearly reveals their opinion about a pen type or writing philosophy. And then I have some guiding questions there. In green, they're going to do evidence, data, real world experience. So any statistics, observations, experiments, testimony, firsthand experience, any of that anecdotal stuff. And again, I have some front loading information there. In purple, they're going to do the counter arguments and possibly take a look at concessions, rebuttals, things of that nature, because I do want to teach that early in the year. In yellow, important keywords or value statements. And again, I have a whole bunch of things there for them to take a look at. So this is just good fodder for them when they have to chug and plug their quotes into the body paragraphs. It helps them keep them organized. Red is going to be the rhetorical appeals and stylistic moves. So even though it's synthesis, I do kind of want to keep us anchored in rhetorical analysis and continue our conversations about ethos, pathos, logos. We could talk about imagery, metaphor, contrast, parallelism, aphorisms, things of that nature. And then ultimately, how is the author persuading the reader? Why might this strategy be effective? Okay, so let's talk about the big question here. So how do I write the introductory paragraph? So those that are familiar with my work know that I guide my kids to go one of two directions. They can either declare the thesis or invert it. If we declare, it just simply means that the student is going to begin with the thesis. They're going to declare the thesis. So they could say something like, beyond a shadow of a doubt, Alex, choose a teacher pen all day long. Just come out and answer the prompt. And then in terms of context and background, I'm going to use different language for this year because I think it simplifies it. I'm going to talk about the internal GPS that is imperative in an introductory paragraph. It's going to be a 4-paragraph essay. So I want kids to hint, all right, kind of imply. What's the directionality towards body paragraph 1 and body paragraph number 2? So that's what I mean by context and background. Set the GPS. And then I want to see a little bit of tier 2 level vocab in here. And what I mean by that is just your average run-of-the-mill SAT level caliber words. Sentence constructs. Again, those that are familiar with my work know that I launch into that very early in the year, and I got a ton of stuff in my YouTube channel around that. And then in terms of parameters, we're shooting for 4 sentences, exactly 4 sentences. You can flip that and start with the GPS or the context and background. And when you whittle it down to the 4th sentence is going to be the thesis. And when you do that, it's noted as an inverted thesis. Same old stuff, tier 2 sentence constructs, 4 sentences. So one of the things that I really emphasize with my students is that prior to writing, they need to know their direction. They have to have the GPS kind of pre-programmed in their head. Otherwise, things could get pretty discursive and they could get waylaid, especially in terms of trying to sustain a cogent line of reasoning. So here's exemplar number 1. It says, "Hey there, Alex. All day long, beyond a shadow of a doubt, get yourself a fountain pen." So you can see this is declarative. Out of the gate, just tell the kid what pen he or she should get. From my perspective, as the student with the highest GPA at my private high school, I've learned that writing well is less about speed and more about shaping ideas with intention, even if that means tolerating a bit of inconvenience. So that sounds like GPS number 1. While I'll admit that ballpoints and rollerballs may win on efficiency and reliability in high-pressure moments, so even in the intro you can do some concessions, they ultimately flatten the writing experience into something mechanical and uninspired. So that's going to be GPS number 2. Instead, fountain pens best support sustained essay writing by encouraging deliberate thinking, balancing minor practical drawbacks with a far richer intellectual and expressive process. So that's an example there, 4 sentences. The vocab fits the frame of the writer's mouth. They didn't break vocal register. Sometimes early in the year when I teach tier 2 level vocab, I have to disabuse students of the notion that if they use a million dollar words that somehow they're doing impressive writing. All the sentence constructs are varied. Early in the year, I note that my students use a lot of independent clauses, and it creates that chop, chop, chop kind of flow, that voice rhythm and flow. So I want to model for them that you don't want to parallel your syntax. Otherwise, you're going to get a very droning, monotonous rhythm. Let's paint another one and take a look at exemplar number 2. Again, I always emphasize this. You got to know your direction. So this one says, "Hi, Alex. Let me get you off the fence and settle the score. Get yourself one of those fancy teacher pens loaded with 5 different colors." So yet again, this is declarative. As someone with the highest GPA at my private high school, I've learned that strong writing often comes from students who are not afraid to revise their thinking mid-sentence, even when it makes their ideas look messy before they become clear. A teacher pen is especially useful for indecisive students who like to change their minds mid-sentence, since it allows quick transitions between tone structures or even entire revisions without starting over. So that sounds like a cardinal point in the GPS. While fountain pens may feel refined and ballpoints may feel reliable, both limit how dynamically a writer can adapt during long, sustained essays. So you can see in the second paragraph, I'm getting my kids to do their concessions and their rebuttals. So pretty much just house those in the second body. It's, our first synthesis essay of the year, so I'm going to keep it kind of elementary. Ultimately, a multi-ink teacher pen best supports the demands of handwritten composition by blending flexibility, visual organization, and sustained writing endurance, even if it sometimes feels more like a classroom gadget than a traditional pen. So you can see you got to have that GPS set. Cook the sentence constructs for voice, rhythm, and flow. Have, sufficient tier 2 level vocab in it. 4 sentences, and either the thesis goes first or last. So let's take a look at another one. Students, you absolutely can do this. It's not hard at all. It just requires a little bit of practice, and your teacher might need to Bob Ross it for you a little bit. So this one says, "Hey there, Alex. This is a tough decision to tussle with, given that you like to crank out essays while also ensuring legibility." So that doesn't sound like a thesis to me, right? It sounds like we're setting up the context and background. So my hunch is that this is going to be inverted. Fountain pens tempt you with elegance, ballpoints promise reliability, and rollerballs try to split the difference, but each option comes with its own trade-offs in speed, comfort, and expressive control that can complicate long-form writing under pressure. Even gel pens, while smooth and occasionally inspiring, tend to blur the line between creativity and chaos when the clock is ticking. After weighing all these competing strengths and weaknesses, the most effective choice for sustained handwritten essay writing is the fountain pen, which best rewards deliberate thinking even when it slows the pace. And there you have it. The thesis statement is at the end. Everything else stays the same. It's static. Sentence constructs, tier 2, 4 sentences. Set that GPS up nice and clear so that things get cogent as far as the line of reasoning goes. So let's see it one more time. This is another inverted, and it starts off, "Hey, buddy, knowing that your hand cramps like an old geezer and that you're a lefty, there's a lot to consider in this lofty affair. Fountain pens may feel like a poetic dream until ink smears across your hand. Gel pens might look stylish until they betray you mid-sentence, and rollerballs promise smooth writing until they start bleeding through the page like you've got no respect for boundaries. Ballpoints, meanwhile, won't win any beauty contest, but they tend to behave themselves when things get long, fast, and slightly painful. After sorting through all the messiness of comfort, control, and reliability, the most practical choice for you is the ballpoint pen." See that thesis right there? The one tool that won't quit when your hand does. So it's really important, and oftentimes I've used these heuristics for many years now. And in the early writing assignments, oftentimes students will kind of chuck too many things in the GPS, It has to be two things, two separate ideas, all right? Because you're doing body paragraph 1, body paragraph 2, intro and a conclusion, just 4 paragraphs. So they want to be very exacting with that. So at this stage of the video, I like to pause and give my students a chance to roll out their introduction. And then one of the things I like to do always when we're done with this is have students submit it so that I can check them over, make sure they're accurate, and then I project some of the better ones to the class anonymously so that students just have some more to take a look at, and you can do the same. So the next question becomes, how do I write the body paragraphs? Intros are done, so let's move on. So as I alluded to, I use something known as the syllogistic method. It's an Aristotelian heuristic, and Aristotle ran a high school called the Lyceum, and the townsfolk, the boys, would go there and learn about polemics, oration, debate. And maybe you've read something like Plato's Republic before, in which they grapple with the essential question, what is justice? And all these philosophical think tankers come up to the mic and they drop their definition of what justice is. And Aristotle, just like us composition teachers, said, some kids are phenomenal at this, some are men, some just kind of tank bomb it. If I could open up the lid of my better students' brains, what's the internal mechanisms going on at play there that are allowing them to be so locked in logically? And one day he had a eureka moment and he said, I got it. Great thinkers think syllogistically. And all that is like a mathematical formula in which you argue from a first premise to a second premise to a conclusion. So let me give you an example. If I were to say arsenic is deadly, you would all nod your head and say, yup, Christian, you are right. Premise 2 is always the textual support portion of the syllogism. So if I were to say, this morning I woke up to make a cup of coffee, and out of the corner of my eye, I see Pickles, my dog, underneath the kitchen sink. Counter door is wide open. And I say, oh no, Pickles. And he pulls his head out, and all over his muzzle and his grizzle, he's got white powder. Well, little do you know that I have a rat infestation problem, and last night I sprinkled arsenic underneath my kitchen sink. What are you going to conclude, right? Well, logically, that's not going to bode well for Pickle. My dog is going to die. Morbid example, but it works to illustrate the point. So if we morph that into a heuristic to do synthesis, here's what we got. And there's a little bit of math to this, so you might want to jot this down, especially students, if you're following my lead. So the first premise is going to be an argument containing a why reason. Up top in the introduction, we don't necessarily get into the minutia and the specifics of why you're arguing that thesis. Here's where you argue the why. So you're going to take your first cardinal point in the GPS and argue the why. Here's the math. I want it to be 3 sentences long. College boards used to say on the synthesis essay, your argument must be central. And I wish that they would still say that because oftentimes students start summarizing the sources way too high up in the body paragraph. And that just becomes plot synopsis to me. They're losing the centrality of their argument. So one way to keep that argument central is to take 3 sentences. So the second premise begins at the 4th sentence. And here's where I want kids to start quoting and paraphrasing. Ultimately, I want them to do a balance of that. Don't quote every time you have the option to. Don't paraphrase every time you have the option to. Kind of teeter-totter balance that out. And then body paragraphs need to be concluded. And this is where we're going to link it, echo, keep the promise of the first premise, and throw it back to the prompt and back to the thesis. One little last piece of math, syllogistic body paragraphs tend to be a little long. We shoot for 10 to 12 sentences. So let's ask ourselves the question, how do I write a first premise? I have some stems that I use with my kids early in the year, and they can say things like, One reason why, or there are a couple of reasons why. If they say reason why, they typically will articulate a reason why in it. So this one says, one major reason why a quill pen suits you best is its ability to force a slower, more intentional writing rhythm that naturally sharpens your attention to word choice and sentence construction. By resisting the speed of modern pens, it compels you to think through ideas more carefully before committing them to the page, which can strengthen analytical depth in longer essays. Do you see, this is all why reason here, okay? This built-in pause between thought and inscription helps prevent rushed phrasing and encourages a more deliberate development of argument structure over time. So 3 sentences, note, there's no quoting, there's no paraphrasing, it's just kid and their centralized argument. Take cardinal point number 1 of the GPS and hammer that why reason. All right, it's very important that it be 3 sentences. You got to argue the why. And then one of the things that I ask my students is this: what's the promise of the first premise? What quotes and or paraphrases must you have to have everything be germane and linked back to that first premise so that the line of reasoning stays intact? So from here, after the first premise is written, I have my kids go quote diving and make sure everything stays nicely aligned. So let's see another first premise just to solidify this. And I'm going to use the stem again. If they say reason why, they should by default articulate a reason why. There's one reason why your best bet is to go the route of the teacher pen. It gives you the freedom to think, revise, and reorganize your ideas as they develop rather than locking you into a single line of thought too early. Its multicolored design allows writers to separate claims, evidence, and shifts in reasoning in real time, turning a messy draft into something visually structured without stopping the flow of writing. For a writer like you who's balancing speed, clarity, and constant revision under pressure, this flexibility becomes less of a luxury and more of a survival strategy in a long handwritten essay. So again, just a why reason, all right? No quotes, no paraphrases, don't get into the sources yet. Keep that argument central, and then you follow the same formula here. You got to keep the promise of the first premise, go get your quotes and paraphrases that all align to that teacher pen. So from here, right, it's what I did when I wrote this is I went quote hunting. I got 3 quotes that I thought would be really good to help me sustain my line of reasoning. And from there, I just move into the second premise. So let's write the rest of the syllogism for example number 2, the teacher pen. So the 4th sentence begins the second premise. And I like little transitions like this that say, take as a perfect case in point, right? So it's a transition into the sources. The insight from a Harvard commencement address that reflects on writing as an evolving cognitive process, noting that the tools we use to write shape the pace at which we think, they influence how we revise, how we hesitate. So one of the things I want to do early in the year is talk to my kids about quote frames. And I have an exercise in my YouTube channel on this, the 10 best quote frames. But I'll just summarize it real quick. I have my students use something called the 5-word rule. If they use a minimum of 5 words, not exactly, but a minimum of 5 words and keep the quote relatively small, it should sound conversational. But you'll notice in this quote here that I use the ellipses method. That is, I think, quote frame number 3 in my slide deck. So I go over how to use brackets, how to use ellipses, and all that stuff. So you can do that with them as well so that they have smooth embedded quotes. So from here, whenever we quote, we got to analyze. This matters because it reframes the pen not as a passive object, but as something that actively structures the rhythm of thought as ideas move onto the page. For a student like you who must sustain argumentation across multiple handwritten pages, that shaping force becomes crucial since hesitation can either deepen reasoning or interrupt it entirely. A teacher pen responds directly to this tension by allowing writers to visually track shifting ideas without losing momentum, turning revision into something immediate rather than retrospective. So a lot of commentary there. I want to get into commentary with my kids. That might be a little heavy on the commentary, but I'm just modeling. So I'm out of space here. The body paragraph continues. Instead of forcing all thinking into a single linear draft, it makes the drafting process visible, which helps organize complex arguments as they develop. This idea becomes even clearer when paired with the poet's claim that language does not arrive fully formed, it unfolds, and the pen should be willing to unfold with it. Source A, since it highlights how writing is inherently iterative rather than fixed from the start. I love that quote right there because source A is talking to the previous source. And I want kids to have 3 quotes in which they're all kind of talking in unison with each other, okay? I used a different quote frame there, all right? There's commentary after the quote. I want them to be able to do that. In that same spirit of process over perfection, a student reflection on writing tools notes that each pen shifts the burden in a different direction, speed, clarity, or expression, source F, reinforcing that every choice comes with trade-offs that shape thinking itself. Even more pragmatically, the Harvard speaker reminds us that the pen is not neutral, it's part of the thinking process, source G, meaning the instrument you hold literally influences how your ideas evolve under pressure. So here we're at the conclusion, and we got to throw it all back to the thesis and the prompt. So have a transition, something like taken together. These perspectives show that writing is not simply about recording thought, but about actively constructing it in real time. The teacher pen, by allowing revision, organization, and expression to coexist on the same page, becomes especially effective for managing that complexity without breaking momentum. So that's a good, thorough body paragraph for synthesis. The line of reasoning is perfectly intact. It's cogent from top to bottom. All the quotes and paraphrases are germane and linked to the promise of the first premise. So intro's done, first body's done. Question becomes, what do I do next? This is the glory of heuristics. You just bust out another syllogism. So you take the next GPS coordinate, which is our refutations, our concessions, our rebuttals, and you might do a first premise that looks like this. Clearly, this is not a one-sided debate. So let's parcel through some of the varying viewpoints and shed some points of clarity. Critics of the teacher pen argue that its multicolor system creates unnecessary visual clutter that can distract from sustained focus during long essay writing. They also contend that switching between colors may interrupt the natural flow of thought, especially under time conditions where consistency and speed are prioritized. Yet these concerns raise a deeper question about whether effective writing should prioritize uninterrupted momentum or visible structured development of ideas as they evolve. So from here, same process. Pause. Go get your quotes. Keep the promise of the first premise. So for this essay, I'm going to have my kids use 3 quotes per body paragraph. So I can have them go in, go get the concessions, the rebuttals, the refutations, whatever you want to call it, and get hammering that point in this body paragraph. So let's talk about wrapping the essay up and how to slap a conclusion on it. I like to use stems early in the year, and I often give this analogy. A conclusion is like the grand finale of a fireworks display, right? The all-encapsulating, all-encompassing moment. So stems like simply said, evidentially, in no other words, when it's all said and done at the end of the day, work really well to get them to that precipice. So something like this works. And again, just 3 or 4 sentences is all you need for a conclusion. So this one says, simply said, the teacher pen is the most effective choice for sustained handwritten essay writing because it transforms the act of drafting into a visible, organized thinking process rather than a rushed transcription of ideas. While other pens may excel in speed, elegance, or reliability, they often force writers to sacrifice either clarity or adaptability under pressure. The teacher pen, by contrast, allows ideas to evolve on the page without breaking momentum, making revision and structure part of the writing process itself rather than an afterthought. In a classroom environment where handwritten essays demand both endurance and intellectual flexibility, It becomes not just a tool for writing, but a tool for thinking more clearly while you write. Okay, that's the whole essay. Happy teaching, happy writing. If you need to reach out to me for anything, my email is teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. So hope you like this one. Like I said, I'm going the route of paper and pen for the first quarter. Really got fatigued this year with all the cheating and the chat created nonsense and not really having administrative support to back me up on that. So this is the route I'm going. So be well, take care, and I'll see you later on.